Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here this morning. It's wonderful to be here with you this morning. I thank you very much for joining me here. Today, we're going to talk about prosperity. But before we do that, let's get started with some breathing, get ourselves centered. So we begin with an in breath through the nose, we hold it, and then we breathe out through the mouth. And so let's begin. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So if we open our eyes or become present, again, it's wonderful to be here. Um, Hello, Jay, but you got to come over here, buddy. So our cat Jay is wanting some attention, but let's see if I can do two things at once. So this morning I want to talk about prosperity, but I want to begin with talking about realizing myself as the divine presence of God, because therein lies the whole motivation for this intellect, for these emotions, to adjust their already always programming and become present to nothing happens to me, all happens through me. Owning I am the presence of God wherever I am shifts the whole paradigm. It literally shifts everything. And so to reach out for prosperity realizes in this person that I must overcome the mindset, the thought process of lack. I must overcome the emotional baggage of not enough, or I'm unworthy, or whatever my emotional baggage may be. And so that's why it's so very important to practice reprogramming this mind and these emotions to replace the teachings that I was given in my upbringing and by this society that we live in. The teachings of my upbringing and what this society has taught me about how to act and how to be are the very thing that limit my ability to express my divine nature. And that was done with reason. The reason is to build the fear, because in the fear is where control lives. Again, to understand why control is desirable, one must really study history and the history of how we find ourselves here in 2020. But it's unnecessary to realize how it came about. All that's necessary is to acknowledge that I have in the past or am today operating basically out of conditioning known as fear, and that it is limiting my ability to experience my divine nature. It's a choice. It's a choice. In this Aquarian age, in this age of breakthrough, in this age of understanding, in this age of community, in this age of oneness, in this age of fulfillment, we must replace the training of the previous age, which is the law and fear. Fear and law are simultaneous, the way they've been taught. It's unnecessary that they are that way, but it is the way they are because of how we were taught. When we look at younger people today in America and we look at who they are and how they operate, many of us who are 68 years old or somewhere in that vicinity have resistance to how those young people show up. But what we must understand is that for better or worse, the society we live in has moved away from generating the levels of fear that most of us experienced being raised in the late 1940s through the 1950s into the 1960s. That level of fear was completely replaced with a whole different state of consciousness and being. That only becomes valuable when I choose to realize that there are reprogramming requirements for myself, by myself, to reset this mind, to reset these emotions, so as to embrace my divine consciousness, to embrace my divine presence, to embrace my ability to experience whatever it is I desire to experience. And the same is so for you. I can't speak for you. And many times people don't understand that and say to me, Paul, Reverend Paul, you should talk more about what we can do, what we are doing, where we can go. And the reality is that I can be responsible for myself and I can change and I can express that change to you. And then you can choose to or not to change. And then we are changed. But the idea that we can be changed in a group is unrealistic. It's a one-on-one experience. What I know today is that we are incarnated in groups. We are incarnated with our soul partners, if you will. But enlightenment only arrives individually. It doesn't happen in groups. Enlightenment arrives individually. And when one is enlightened, it simply means that one becomes consciously aware of that individual's divine presence, that individual's expression of God as Paul. It's a beautiful thing when it happens. But what we need to know is that we can reprogram the mind and we can reprogram the emotions and we can set the whole ball in motion and it will gain momentum and pick up along the way of its own volition through inertia, if nothing else. It will pick up and move, and change will manifest, and freedom for the individual will show up. And when freedom for the individual shows up, then that individual can share freedom with brothers and sisters and show what freedom looks like. And then brothers and sisters will desire freedom and move out accordingly. And so for today, in preparing for conscious embrace of prosperity, I'm going to begin with defining this world that we live in, defining it as the kingdom of heaven. And so we begin. There is nothing but absolute God. There is nothing but absolute in manifestation. And man is the full and complete expression of absolute, of mind, of divine mind. I am the consciousness of God, and through me, all the divine ideas reveal themselves in my world. Wherever God is, there heaven is. And so I am in heaven at every instant, for I am always in the absolute presence and conscious of the infinite mind. My present world is heaven. It is good. It is alive with truth, love, and perfection. There is no evil in my present experience, for absolute is where I am and is what I am. My heavenly world is filled with spiritual beings forever blessing and benefiting me. No man can hurt me, for divine love fills all the people in my world. Nothing can confuse me, for God is order, harmony, and right action at every instant and in all places. There is no past nor future. Today is the day of absolute, of Lord. Today is the day of completion. Today is the day of expression and demonstration. This moment is the only time there is, and this moment is saturated with divine consciousness, divine presence, with God, with absolute. It surrounds me, fills me, upholds me now and forevermore. I live, move, and have my being in God's universe of good. And so it is. And so it is. And now our reprogramming for prosperity. Divine Goddess is my unfailing, permanent, and perfect supply. I do not work for a living. I work for the glory of God and the good of my fellow men and women and children. There is no lack, no limitation. Goddess's mind and its perfect ideas sustain me in all ways. I live in abundance. I rejoice in plenty, and I am prosperous in all my ways. Goddess's money is mine for use for good, and I use it now with pleasure and wisdom. And so it is. And so it is. And in these preparations, in these prayers, in these readings, in these opportunities to speak to myself, to my mind, I reprogram the thought process. The repetition of these practices allows a different set of ideas and a different set of codes and a different set of guidelines to operate within this existence. Once I had to have the computer replaced in my car. And before that happened, many things didn't work. The transmission slipped, the key wouldn't turn it on. When it did click and turn on, the whole entertainment system and the Bluetooth system didn't work. The traction system didn't work. And so I take it to the mechanic or the mechanic shop, and they replace the computer. And they put in a new computer programmed to the current programming. And not only did my car return to its former self, it became better than it was before. Because the updated programming allowed the systems to operate in a more efficient way. And that more efficient way was very pleasurable for my driving practices. Reprogramming our minds and our emotions resets the ego. And when we reset the ego, we change the way we show up in this world. And the way we show up in this world draws unto us the experiences of our day-to-day life. I am free and you are free. I am the presence of God wherever I am, and you are the presence of God wherever you are. I invite you to embrace this understanding. I invite you to embrace this consciousness. And I acknowledge you as the presence of God. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste.